What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading. Today, we're going to take a look at Bitcoin dominance, when Bitcoin dominance could fall, when altcoins could start to see a proper rally, and which altcoins you need to be watching to get a sense of when we could see the start of an altcoin season. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell. Before we get started, do keep in mind that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just my personal analysis of these charts. Your analysis could be different, and if it is, that's awesome, because the more difference of opinion that we have, the better traders and the better investors we're all going to become. So starting off here, guys, with Bitcoin dominance. For those of you who don't know, Bitcoin dominance just basically measures what percentage of the total crypto market cap is Bitcoin. A lot of people misunderstand Bitcoin dominance to think that when Bitcoin dominance is going up, altcoins are going down. That's not true. You can have a scenario similar to what we're seeing now, which is where everything is kind of going up, but Bitcoin is going up more than most altcoins, or more than the average altcoin, let's say. That doesn't mean that altcoins aren't pumping. It just means that most of them are pumping less than Bitcoin. And again, this is something that a lot of people don't understand, and they think that Bitcoin dominance going up automatically means that altcoins will go down. This is just not true at all. So that's the first thing we need to get out of the way. Second thing, of course, to address is that Bitcoin dominance has basically been in a strong uptrend now for a couple of years. And of course, everyone has been wondering when Bitcoin dominance will fall, because when it falls, that's typically when we start to see an altcoin season. And as you guys can see, there's this trend line that I drew. We're on the daily chart, by the way. This is a trend line I actually drew the other day when we saw Bitcoin dominance fall down. And I was thinking, okay, how low could it go? And I drew up this trend line and I said, okay, let's check it, in a week or in a few days. And if it's accurate, then maybe I'll do a video about it. And here we are. So that trend line turned out to be pretty accurate. Of course, you could have a lot of debate about like, oh, it should be drawn a little bit differently or whatever. Who cares? Just this is the way that I draw my trend line. And it seems to have worked pretty nicely here in predicting, let's say, the local bottom for Bitcoin dominance. And of course, that begs the question of what comes next. Is Bitcoin dominance going to keep grinding higher? Or when are we really going to see a meltdown in Bitcoin dominance and a huge rally in altcoins, which is, of course, what a lot of people have been waiting for. Again, like the way that I kind of do my technical analysis, especially when it comes to something like Bitcoin dominance, which in my opinion, like the reason why I don't watch it too much personally is because it can be warped by things like, for example, a stablecoin supply or the rise of tokenized RWAs. Some of you might know that the supply of tokenized gold coins like PaxG and Pax and XAUT, or however you pronounce it, Tether Gold and Paxos Gold, like tokens like that, their supply has grown pretty substantially. And of course, that can have the effect, let's say, of like suppressing potentially Bitcoin dominance. And you could make the argument that Bitcoin dominance is actually much higher than meets the eye because you've seen a growth in other tokens. And of course, some would say that the same is true for like altcoin unlocks, right? That as you see more altcoins, more supply of altcoins unlock, then that basically artificially increases the market cap of altcoins, which basically also has the practical effect of suppressing Bitcoin dominance. So again, this is why I don't personally watch it. There's so many variables at play. Bitcoin dominance, in my view, does not give a very accurate representation of what's going on, which of course, which is why you have guys like Ben Cowan looking at things through different lenses. Like they look at like, I don't know, stablecoin dominance and stuff like that, and they subtract out like Ethereum dominance and all this fancy stuff. That's not really my cup of tea, but of course, there is a utility in looking at things through that lens. Anyways, the way that I look at indicators like Bitcoin dominance, which again, I don't necessarily think that technical analysis is super effective on them, although this trend line did work pretty well. The main thing that I look for here is patterns. Like I like to see a repeat of patterns. And what I'm seeing now, guys, is something very similar actually to what we saw in kind of October and November of last year, which is where there was a run up in Bitcoin dominance, an initial drop, then a little bit of chop, and then a huge drop in Bitcoin dominance. And I actually think that we're seeing something similar here, where now maybe we'll see Bitcoin dominance surge higher. And again, I believe that's going to be because everything is going to be rallying, but Bitcoin will be rallying more. Maybe it breaks out and goes to like, I don't know, like 120K, 140K, whatever. So you get a huge rally in Bitcoin dominance. Then you get a drop as altcoins come back. Maybe Bitcoin sees another leg higher up to like 200K or something, right? And I'm not saying this will happen. I'm just giving you an example of like how things could play out, where basically Bitcoin dominance rises again because Bitcoin is rallying. Everything else is rallying too. It doesn't mean altcoins are going to crash. So Bitcoin dominance rises, then it falls again as altcoins catch up. Then Bitcoin has another leg higher, and like outperforms altcoins again, and you end up with this kind of choppy action that we saw here, basically in early November, just after Trump was elected. And of course, what happened after Trump's election is that there was a huge collapse in Bitcoin dominance, and of course, this was kind of like a mini altcoin season that we had here for a couple of months, and I believe we saw something similar early last year, although it's a little bit harder to see in the charts. Everything was kind of rallying together, and as you might have noticed there's another trend line here, and in my view, this is how low Bitcoin dominance could go. But before we get to that, I do think that the first thing that needs to happen here is Bitcoin dominance does need to see a clean break below this trend line. I think that as soon as it sees a break below 60%, that's like kind of like a key psychological level that I'm sure lots of traders and models are watching. But a break anywhere below, let's say 60 or 59%, that'll probably translate to like a free fall in Bitcoin dominance. And I do think that it'll fall somewhere down to let's say around 50% by September timeframe is what I'm looking at. And, what will the catalyst be, of course, is the thing that everyone's asking. There's lots of different things, like, I don't know, like Trump launching his DeFi protocol, stablecoin regulations passing, broader crypto market regulations passing, something breaking in the financial system that requires governments and central banks to stimulate, which is like rocket fuel for the crypto market. It could be as simple as whales borrowing against their Bitcoin after it rallies. Whales borrow against their Bitcoin, and then they basically pump that into altcoins to get to suck in retail investors and basically manipulate altcoins and make some profits. That's kind of what's happened historically. So there's many different catalysts that you can point to and say this is why it's going to happen. Again, what we're just looking at now is just like the chart and seeing like a repeat of history. The last thing I'll mention about this particular pattern here before I forget is that if we are seeing a repeat of what we saw last year, you'll notice that the magnitude of this basically up move in Bitcoin dominance, as well as this potential chop that we're about to see, the magnitude is much bigger, right? Like before you could say, okay, like the chop was within like 2%, but here like the chop of the magnitude was like 3 or 4%, right? Like from top to bottom here. So I suspect that we'll see some pretty substantial chop here. And logically, that means that this down move will be a lot bigger. Hence why I'm looking for a drop potentially down to something around 50%. Who knows? Maybe it'll go to like 55%. Again, this doesn't really tell us much about what altcoins are going to do, for the simple reason that again, like this Bitcoin dominance can be warped by a whole bunch of things like token unlocks, the growth of tokenized RWAs, the growth of stablecoins. All this stuff can have an effect on Bitcoin dominance. And again, yeah, it's just this is not something that I watch personally. But the point being is that I do think that the Bitcoin dominance will fall somewhere to around, let's say, 50%. I know a lot of people are looking, they're looking historically and saying, wow, like we're going to see the peak when Bitcoin dominance falls to somewhere around 45% or 40%. But if you actually zoom out a lot, guys, and this is kind of like my hot take, if you zoom out a lot to Bitcoin dominance here and you look at it on the monthly, what I actually think that we're seeing here is kind of like a basically like a big double bottom pattern that's lasting like almost a decade. And I think that what's going to happen is that we're going to see a drop down to 50%. Then we're going to see Bitcoin dominance start rising and not stop. And that's basically because most altcoins, I think, are going to actually, in the next bear market, most altcoins will probably be out. And we'll see kind of like an inverse of what we saw here during the first altcoin season, that you saw a huge meltdown in Bitcoin dominance. I think that we're going to see a melt up, but I don't think it's started yet. I think there will be one last kind of like pullback, and then we see a melt up. And you can even see here, just using basic technical analysis, that there's a strong zone of support, let's say, that in my opinion needs to be kind of tested or like retested, because you could make the argument that Bitcoin dominance saw a breakout and it's been waiting to have a retest of this level before moving higher. And again, this is just from a purely technical perspective. Again, I don't think that technical analysis works too well on Bitcoin dominance, but then again, I do use technical analysis on like basically everything. But anyways, with that in mind, of course, you might be wondering, okay, then tell us like when exactly altcoins are going to pump, or rather how high they could go. And of course, one way to do that, guys, is to look at the others chart. And what I did here is, of course, I have these trend lines that I've been watching now for over a year. And what I did is I basically added some text here to kind of reflect the sentiment that we see at these different levels. So of course, the closer that we are to this bottom trend line, the more that people say that it's over, altcoins are dead, altcoins are never going to rally. And of course, we spent quite a bit of time in that range, last year and also this year. Again, the more that we're kind of closer to this level, the more that people say, oh, like it's over, and like, talking about how it's going to be Bitcoin only, whatever. Now that we're somewhere in the middle of this range, people are saying, well, I'm not sure how I feel. I don't know if we're back yet or whatever. And of course, as we approach this line, then a lot of people will be saying, we're so back. Altcoin season is back. And I do think we're going to see a break above that. And we'll see basically others going up much higher. But the thing is that others is primarily driven by not just Ethereum, but also Solana. I'll get to that in a second. First, I just want to address that what we're seeing here, in my view, is literally just an accelerated version of basically the crash and accumulation that we saw last year. We're seeing an accelerated version of that right now. And I do think that potentially by the end of the month, others could be back up to around, let's say, 330 billion, which would be like another, 10 or 20%. I think 20% move from the current price. Again, 20% average across most altcoins potentially by the end of the month is basically what this chart is suggesting. After that, who knows, maybe we'll see like a little bit of a pullback and then a continuation higher. And of course, when we get that pullback and the closer we get to that line, then people will say it's so over, it's over. I knew it. This was a bear market rally. But again, when you zoom out, it's pretty clear that we saw a pretty nice bottoming pattern here, like an inverse head and shoulders, similar to what we saw here is like a like a double bottom. I think is what I mentioned on my live stream with Aaron. So we have a double bottom, another kind of double bottom, and then we're going to see a recovery. And I do think that the up move, like we saw here, like look how quickly that up move happened. I think we're going to see something very similar where that up move is going to be very quick and very aggressive. And I do think that the others target, I do think it'll hit close to a trillion probably. And if it does, then that would result in basically an average 4x return across most altcoins. That does not mean that every altcoin is going to 4x. Some of them will do more than that. Many of them will do less than that because most altcoins aren't very high quality. But high quality altcoins, again, like to see a 5x, 10x, even like 15x return, I think is not going to be surprising in the slightest, especially if you were accumulating down here in the zone. Obviously, if you're starting to buy when we're already up somewhere around 400 billion or 450 billion, then the average return is going to be much less. But in my personal strategy, I've been accumulating very aggressively as soon as we hit this lower trend line. I would also accumulate up here in case there's a risk that prices keep going higher. So I'd accumulate a little bit here, accumulate a lot down here, accumulate a little bit up here, and accumulate a lot down here. And my portfolio is basically fully stacked and ready for like this final melt up and altcoin season over the summer, essentially. Just buying and holding, simplest strategy. Not very easy for most people, especially when you have like 50, 60, 70, 80% drawdowns. But again, like history suggests that we're going to see a big altcoin season in the next couple of months. Anyways, this brings me now to the Ethereum chart. Again, the reason why you need to be watching Ethereum and Solana as it relates to altcoins is because most altcoins with economic value currently exist on Ethereum and Solana. So when ETH's price pumps, most altcoins on Ethereum will pump, and when Solana's price pumps, most altcoins on Solana will pump. Why is that? Because most altcoins on Ethereum trade against ETH, most altcoins on Solana trade against Sol. So when those cryptos go up, then the dollar value of the altcoins will go up, even if no one is actually buying that altcoin, if that makes any sense. Like, for example, Solana goes up 10%, then because this altcoin is trading primarily against Sol, it will also go up probably around 10%, just because the appreciation of the, I think, denominator, if I remember my terminology correctly, the denominator in that equation, which is Sol, has gone up by 10%. And so long as that ratio doesn't change, then the US dollar value of that altcoin will also go up 10%. So anyways, guys, as you can see here, we're on the weekly chart for ETH. Very nice pattern here. It's basically looking like a bull flag. If that bull flag does play out, then we'll be looking at around like a 3.2K ETH price. Some of you might know that there's a CME gap somewhere around that level. This is a level that could be hit as soon as this week. I know I've been saying that now, I think, for a couple of weeks about many of these altcoins, but now you can see it's like, like this whole way down, I was calling basically for a move like this, came a couple of weeks later than expected. It happens anyways, but we're seeing now ETH, in my opinion, seeing a pretty big breakout, basically a bull flag heading up likely to around 3,200. Maybe there'll be some resistance around 3,000 because that's a key psychological level. But again, there is a CME gap somewhere around 3,200. So don't be surprised if ETH rallies up to that later this week or next week. And then moving on to Solana, same thing. It's looking a little bit weaker on the weekly for now, but I do think that it's also going to see a bull flag and head up somewhere to around $220, which is, of course, you can see here, even it's like a key zone of resistance somewhere 210, 220, let's say ish. And of course, that begs the question, what would the catalyst for this be? I think that's the Accelerate conference that's starting tomorrow. So tomorrow and Friday, it's possible that we're going to get big announcements, and that could be the thing that causes Sol to experience that rally above $200 later this week or maybe sometime next week. But in either case, yeah, like ETH and Sol are basically the main altcoins to watch if you want to get a sense of where others is going. ETH and Sol charts are both looking super bullish. The others chart is also looking pretty bullish. Looks like we have a bottoming pattern and we're seeing a reversal out. And again, when you get confirmation from ETH and from Sol that it does look like others is going to keep heading higher, then I would not stand in the way of that. And just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, I suppose. And yeah, it's going to be really exciting a couple of weeks. And it's I guess rest in peace to everyone who thought sell on May and go away was a thing. Anyways, if you did make it this far and you want to help us out, then be sure to check out the Coin Bureau deals page. You might have noticed that we were using Binance. We have a 20% trading fee discount and up to $600 of bonuses. These are the biggest discounts that you can get. They're available exclusively through the Coin Bureau. The way that you take advantage of these deals is just to click the link in the description or in the comments comments. It'll take you to a page that looks like this. Enter your email or phone number. Signing up takes 2 minutes. It's super simple. Binance has every single altcoin you can need. If you can't use Binance for whatever reason, then be sure to check out our other deals. We also have exchange deals for US and UK residents that are available. And again, when you use these deals, you get a trading fee discount. The exchange gets a new user, and we get a cut of your trading fees. So it really helps us out, really helps me out. So do check out those deals when you get a chance, because who knows, they might not be around for long. Anyways, guys, if you did make it this far, then smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.